All right, we got our recording on. All right, good morning, everyone. We're really excited that we are back with Rise with Ice Miller and Friends. I'm Christina Fugate. I'm a partner at Ice Miller, and I'll be joining with us in a minute or so will be Alice Kelly, who's another partner with me. And we're really excited that Andrew Fay and Samantha Julka are joining us. If you haven't been with us before with our Rise with Ice Miller and Friends webcast, we like to keep these interactive. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them throughout. We'll keep an eye on the question and answer box. Certainly leave some room at the end. And all of our episodes, we've been doing this now since the last part of 2020. All of our episodes are on our Ice Miller webpage. We also now have a Ice Miller YouTube page. And so all of our recordings are stored on there, and we'll put this one on there as well once we're complete. And we also have a drawing at the end, so stick around for those that are live. We'll have one of our listeners will get a lucky gift card, so we'll do that towards the end. And we always like to start out our Rise webcast with polling the audience, whether you are a coffee drinker, a tea, or something else. I know I'm a coffee drinker. Oh, and it looks like Alice is here. Alice, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Sorry, it's been a technologically challenging morning. Let's just say that. Here we go. Wait, did I start video? All right. Hi. Sorry. Welcome, everybody. Microsoft and WebEx are in my sights today, so.
But
go ahead.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, Andrew and Samantha, we're really excited that you joined us. Andrew, you are the founder and president of Gettys Group, and Samantha, the president and founder of DORIS. I'm going to turn it over to both of you to give a brief introduction of yourself and your background. Andrew, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, sure. So morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. Warm greetings from a balmy, soupy Chicago, which is where we started our business in 1988. So we're headquartered here, and we have offices in Asia, Pacific, and also in the Middle East. And our primary business is providing services to others in the hospitality sector, branding, interior design, procurement of furniture, fixtures, equipment, development consulting services. But we're also in the hotel development business ourselves. We actually opened 3 hotels in the US during the pandemic, so we've got some stories to tell about that. One of the other things that we've been doing a lot more of recently is focusing on our Hotel of Tomorrow global think tank, which is a group of people, usually about 300 people from around the world, focusing on the issues of hospitality, hotels of the future, and what that might look like, particularly in a post-pandemic environment. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about that as well later on. So that's us in a nutshell.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about how you opened up those 3 hotels in that Hotel tomorrow. That's really exciting. So Sam, do you want to give an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm honored to speak alongside Andrew. So I'm the president and founder of a company called DORIS, and I'm just south of Andrew, but very balmy still, sitting in Indianapolis, Indiana. So our company does workplace research. So we most traditionally focus on collecting unique stakeholder data within organizations who are thinking about making some kind of physical change to generally office space. Sometimes we're working in higher ed or manufacturing, but we are looking at collecting local data. So we're not generally seen as global or trend-based research house. We're kind of unique in that we're local. We're not like Andrew, we can't do interior design projects or architectural, or really we can't implement anything. We're a collection of researchers, and we've been highly fascinated by sort of what has come out of, certainly don't love the pandemic, but we're very interested in how this has changed the world of work. And we've done a few projects where we actually have looked acutely at how folks are working in the hybrid model. We wrote a book called Hello Hybrid that I'm happy to talk about our findings with that. And also we work with y'all at Ice Miller. We franchised right before the pandemic started. So we have offices, or I guess franchises, in 5 locations around the US.
Thanks, Sam. And I'm really curious about that, the decision that you made to franchise. So why did you make that decision? Why go the franchising route?
Yeah, great question. And it's a long story that I'll try to make a short story. We had access to a group of people around the country that were interested in having a partnership with DORIS, with our company, but they already owned businesses that were adjacent to what we did. And so after kind of ruminating on how were we going to partner with them and what was that going to look like, we decided that instead of trying to raise a bunch of capital and maybe open these offices uniquely ourselves throughout the country, we would work on creating a franchise system where we could offer them the opportunity to sort of buy in and create their own unique additional business to what they already owned. And so we did that. That's why we started in that fashion. And like anything, we're probably a pretty innovative, unique company, very emergent. A lot of times when people will learn what we do, they'll say, "We've never heard of that before. We didn't even know that was a thing." And so, I think we started franchising in this direction. And as we're getting into it, we're starting to learn how to massage the model even more, and where we want to take it and who we want to be, let's say, our franchisees as we move into the future, especially as the pandemic has certainly changed the AEC world in a big way.
Well, thank you both. It's just super fascinating businesses you're both in. It looks like most of us drink coffee. 47% at coffee and 22, I think, at tea, and then the rest other. So, the big thing we've all been talking about, I feel like we're all coming up for air and looking back on the 2 years and not really sure what the heck just happened. But starting with you, Andrew, how do you think the hoteling and hospitality industry has changed, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I would say, when you look at the hospitality sector overall, particularly in the US, where the majority of our business currently is, that sector was really beaten up by this pandemic. I think few industries were probably hit harder in reality. But the good news is, look, it's bouncing back absolutely beautifully. It's kind of remarkable, and I think that's due in large part to a lot of pent-up demand. A lot of people have delayed trips. This concept of revenge travel. Consumers have a lot more savings. Corporate balance sheets are strong, and so I think that all bodes well for the immediate future of the industry. And then certainly the administration this week lifting the requirement of COVID testing for international arrivals in the country will have a massive impact on the remainder of this year. So we expect that will result in probably 5 to 10 million incremental visitors to the US between now and the end of the year. So that is all really great news, and that's despite the headwinds that everybody faces with a war in Europe and inflation and discussions of recession and all that stuff, a softening economy. But we just don't see the hotel sector slowing down. And in fact, all of the CEOs of the major hotel companies have been out and about talking in the last couple of weeks, anticipating that this summer will for Hilton, it will be the busiest summer in the history of the company for the last 103 years. So, that's all really good. And then, that's the kind of the aggregate picture. And I think but it's not true necessarily for the entire country. So cities like Chicago, for example, much slower to recover and bounce back. Cities that are requiring, really basically big convention business. McCormick Place in Chicago is really the engine of the downtown hospitality industry. And until that comes back, there's going to be some challenges. And the same, I think, is true in Minneapolis and a lot of, generally Midwestern cities seem to be struggling more than the cities on the coast. So, but hopefully that'll change soon. And I think so that's kind of the macro perspective, and from the guest perspective, we're really, like Sam, we're very focused on the end user and really understanding who our consumer is and who we're designing for and what it is that they want. And some of their behaviors have changed. And one of the big issues that I know Sam referenced with too is like, which of those behaviors are now permanent changes or which are fleeting and related to the pandemic. So I think at the end of the day, our business is really about making people feel great. If we can make our guests feel great, our owners will feel great, we'll create value in the real estate, and the whole thing kind of fits together and works out. So really understanding what is important to consumers, and as they think and reevaluate the purpose of their lives and how they like to live, I think is going to be very, very important to us going forward. And I think that companies like all of ours, it's far more important for us to articulate our purpose. I was at a hotel conference in Berlin a few weeks ago, and then in New York last week, investment conferences, and literally ESG comes up in every single session. It doesn't matter if it's design, investments, operations, food and beverage. ESG just seems to weave its way in, and I think that's something that we really need to be very focused on going forward as well.
Sam, what about you? What do you see as COVID's impact and change of direction for the future?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to double down. Yeah, ESG is in many of my conversations right now. I mean, I think I have a call this afternoon with a woman just to specifically talk about, that world. But we are seeing probably similar things to what Andrew is in that, offices are starting to rethink what is the workplace of the future. And it's not going to look like it maybe did, December of 2019 or even March of 2020, wherever we want to kind of draw that line. Offices are going to look way different because people are starting to demand something that looks a lot different. And interestingly, the folks that understand the hospitality world are probably going to come out majorly on top in this, because workplaces are now becoming experiential destinations, and organizations have to think about what is the reason for which someone would drive down here, come here, get on a train to come here, whatever it might be. Why would they do that? And what's the business case for them doing that? And yes, once they get here, they need to maybe collaborate with colleagues. Maybe they need to connect with colleagues to build community. There might need to be some purpose or reason behind, other than just that it was hardwired into them, as children, because they saw their parents going to work from 8 to 5. There's now a sort of a different value system in place. And buildings are no longer just containers that hold a workforce. They're a tool that the workforce has to demand how they want to use that tool. And each organization will probably have slightly different ways in which that space needs to be shaped as a tool for their workforce to use. And we're starting to see leaders ask those really big questions as they start to think about, as it's safe for workforces to convene again.
Yeah, I mean, if I can layer on to that, I mean, I think as we think about guests in hotels and what they're interested in, and issues of health and well-being and connection with the outdoors and clean air and fresh organic foods and exercise facilities and bringing the outdoors in and the indoors out and all these kind of things that we're dealing with in hotels and hospitality, I think the same thing applies to commercial office. And we're certainly doing a lot more work in the commercial office space now too. We call it hospitality infused real estate, because commercial office owners and multifamily residential owners are coming to us and saying, hey, look, we need to make this feel more like a hotel. We need to amenitize the space because we need to be able to, retain our existing tenants, attract new tenants or residents, and certainly a much more amenity-rich commercial office or multifamily environment is what their end users are looking for, and have very similar needs or evolved needs to that of a hotel guest. So Sam, you're right. I think for us, we're taking our hospitality experience and parlaying that into senior living, student housing, multifamily residential, commercial office particularly, because people are looking to the hospitality sector for cues in that regard.
Yeah, actually, I'd be really curious. So I've met with a few different large heads of real estate, probably Fortune 100 companies, that are starting to build I'm not even sure what word to use, but I'm going to call them like destination clubhouses sort of around the country, where they'll have, they'll have one in Phoenix, they'll have one in Pacific Northwest, they'll have one in New York, and then their teams will convene, to these locations, and they're not traditional offices. They're sort of maybe like a conference center, but also maybe like a vacation or a resort destination. I'm not sure if you're starting to see that in your work as well, but I think it's fascinating, this, push for more of that.
Yeah, no, we're definitely seeing that. And I would say too, in the commercial office arena, with certain ownership groups, if you're a tenant in their Boston building, you would then have access to their facilities, amenities in Los Angeles or New York or Tampa or wherever else they have real estate by virtue of the fact of being a tenant there. So you can access amenities in other buildings around the country by being a tenant. So it's almost literally like being a member of a club now.
Yeah.
And it's a really great, kind of way, sticky way to, keep hold of your customer and make sure that they're constantly experiencing your facilities and amenities around the country rather than somebody else's. And there's a certain, sense of privilege and membership that comes with that.
Yeah.
So Andrew, before we leave the COVID topic, I do want to ask about the 3 hotels that you opened. How did you do that, and what challenges did you face along the way?
Okay, right. Well, we opened in Nashville, we opened in Minneapolis, and we opened in San Antonio. So Nashville was the first one to, Minneapolis was the first one to open, and Minneapolis was a real struggle. I mean, the construction piece, and we weren't necessarily hampered by all the supply chain issues that we talk about today because it was early on in the pandemic, but because of all the things that happened in Minneapolis, with the tragedy with George Floyd and a lot of the other events that took place there, that really got clobbered badly. So we were able to open a very beautiful hotel, but it's still a struggle in downtown Minneapolis getting people to come to that hotel. So I think that's going to change over the summer. Nashville was the next one to arrive, and that was a lot more complicated because that was in the full swing of the pandemic. So we had all sorts of construction shutdowns when we had COVID cases on site. We had all sorts of supply chain issues, but we ultimately got open a couple of months late, but opened, and that is an incredibly successful hotel. Nashville is an amazing market, so we're really grateful for that. And then the most recent one we opened, which had similar challenges to Nashville along the way, was in San Antonio at the airport, a Marriott hotel there that we opened a couple of months ago now. Again, a little bit late, delayed, but open nonetheless. And then that's a market that's roaring back too. I think a lot of these markets, these net migration markets, if you look at Florida, Texas, Arizona, Tennessee, places like that, are great places to be building hospitality product right now because there really is enormous demand. But I think, I would say relatively unscathed, as I think about all of the challenges that, we all faced during that period and our lockdowns and not coming to work and all that kind of stuff, those projects went relatively smoothly. It's interesting too, we sit in our offices and locked down and don't come to the office and all of these things that were happening. At the same time, all of our team members working in the field in our hotels were reporting to work every single day, running a 24-hour a day, 7-day-a-week business while we're like, oh, it's too dangerous to come to the office. And so, we really tried during that period to be here as much as possible and connecting with our teams in the field because it really felt terribly unfair to me. And I think this notion of fairness and equitable and equality and such in the workplace is really so important for us going forward. But that was a strange kind of phenomenon for us. But generally speaking, pretty good. And I think as a result of Nashville's success, and as we think about the future of the hospitality sector, we've just been approved for phase 2 there, which will be another hotel and 300 apartments and some retail. And then we're also, we just got approved for our project in Indianapolis, which is the King Cole building, which we're converting to a Motto Hotel by Hilton, and that project will start as well. So I think as we look at the hospitality sector in general, I mean, we've just, our capital partners have approved a couple of $100 million of projects for us to proceed immediately. I think that also just kind of just generally bodes well about the condition of the hospitality sector.
Right. Thank you. So we want to put up a second poll, and this one is going back to the are you back to work? So are you back? Are you still working remotely, or are you working maybe a hybrid? We'll see what the results are with that.
And then I guess I would ask Andrew and Sam, I, like we have a hybrid policy. Does everybody follow it? I'm going to say no. We still have a lot of people being remote. I'm just curious what you're seeing with these hybrid policies, if they're really being, even the full return to work, is it working, and is there enforcement? The office worker is quite different from the essential worker.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I could take a little stab at this. This is a question that comes up right now on every single project, and leaders are, from our perspective, leaders are really at a loss. They don't exactly know how to handle this. It has been a challenging time to be a leader. There's a lot of opinions. And they're, based on, let's say, personal values and morals and whatever you might, be made up of personally. So we'll be in meetings with leaders and, facilitating conversations, and it's not laughable in the moment, but we'll sometimes, come back to the office and think, well, that was so interesting that came out that way. But, they'll say, you'll hear them discussing real life scenarios. I had an employee that was working remote and called me, or I called her and she was on her way to PetSmart to get dog food at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I couldn't believe it. And, that's so out of line. And another leader will be like, why is that out of line? I did that yesterday. And so you're finding that they're struggling to navigate, and they're in these little myopic situations that will either inflame perspective, and they're somewhat isolated too at times from their leadership team. So they're struggling to figure out, how do we put all of this together? But I think the ones that are successful are the ones that decide and work very connectedly to decide what their path forward is, and then they don't back channel different information. So they decide where. I was really proud of this group we worked with. It was in 2020 in October, and they said, we're coming back to the office. We need to be together, and they stuck with it, and they chose that path, and that's what they did. And then we will work with other groups that choose very different paths, but the ones that do well are the ones where the leadership teams can really stick behind what they're saying. They're able to iterate on what they're doing, and that's fine, but they're not back channeling to other people. Well, we really want you in the office, but we're saying it's hybrid or remote or whatever. The ones that are sticking with and actually putting intention behind it, I think, are the ones that are being more successful in the end, and inspiring, let's say, a workforce to want to follow them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Sam, that, the consistency of the message and backing up those words with deeds is certainly a big part of it. We're back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays in the office. We have a lot of people that are here on Monday and Friday as well. I mean, we're certainly open, and anybody can come at any time they want to. And I think, as time goes by, I mean, yesterday was a really great example, because we probably had, 30 or 40 visitors in the office during the course of the day. People were in for lunch. There was an afternoon presentations, people coming out, and then people were out to dinner with clients and things last night in the city here in Chicago. And it was like, hey, that just felt great. And, it's kind of fun to be at the office. But when there was nothing really happening at the office, we're like, oh, it's not that much fun to go there. So I think the more that we can activate the office, which seems to be happening now, is really important. And I feel strongly that, we as business owners have almost a moral obligation to activate these office buildings and energize our city. Because, the more people that come to work and are in the offices and are buying sandwiches and going to restaurants and doing things, the quicker these cities will come back. And as we were saying earlier, Chicago, as an example, has been slower than, the New Yorks and Los Angeles and Miami's to re-energize and reactivate. So I think that's a very important part of it. And I think, in our business too, and the kind of things that we do, being together, collaborating in a very creative business is really a big part of it. So I think providing a place that people can want to come to enjoy the kind of things that we were talking about before, this hospitality infused real estate. We have a very beautiful setting here, there's some really compelling reasons to come. And so I think pretty much 90+% of our team is now, fully on board with that. And we'll see where that leads us in the future. And then, of course, our guys we're traveling all the time as well. So it's the notion of, am I in the office or am I working or am I remote? The remote piece is often now travel, not necessarily at home anyway. And it'll be interesting to see if this is the route that we keep up, or if we, go to a more time in the office required in the future. We're not at all anywhere near that right now. It seems to be working quite well, and people seem generally happy, which is the main mission, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, trying to keep our team as cohesive and happy and engaged as possible.
That's great. Now, I want to switch gears a little bit, and we've already talked about Nashville being a part of the country that seems to be exploding.
Right.
And I want to talk about just growth in general in the real estate industry. Where are there certain markets where you're seeing growth, such as Nashville, certain areas such as hospitality, industrial, office setting? Where are you seeing the growth, and where do you see it heading in the next year, a couple of years from now?
Do you want me to take that one first?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it varies, by market to market, but and I think I think we're now at this point where we're living alongside the virus, right? So we're trying to get back to as much business as usual, and then if you look just at the real estate world generally, global real estate transactions are at an all-time high. That could change with the volatility in the debt markets and other things that are happening. But right now, today, world records for real estate transactions. And I think, specific markets in the US, we talked about some of these net migration states, particularly in the South, are doing extremely well. I think this notion of hospitality infused real estate is a real opportunity. And when I look out the window here and I see all these office buildings, see enormous opportunity, because a lot of these buildings are from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and just don't have all of the things that we were talking about in terms of amenities in order to be able to attract and retain fabulous tenants. In the hospitality sector, I think we're going to see really dramatic growth there. There's so much deferred maintenance in these buildings, right? Things were just not done for the last 2-3 years. Or maybe in some situations 4 or 5, right?
Yeah.
So, and then when you couple that with, hey, I used to charge $200 for this room and it's now $600, which is what we're seeing because the industry has enormous pricing power right now. I think the guests are going to be like, well, okay, but they're going to be a lot less forgiving, and they're going to be much more demanding of updated physical plans and a much, significantly enhanced experience. People are no longer, accepting the COVID excuse. We've kind of moved on from that as we live alongside this. And so those that are not reinvesting in their assets and making sure that the kind of product and service and experience that they're delivering is commensurate with the significantly inflated pricing, 2019 pricing versus now. Anybody on this call this morning that booked a vacation recently will know exactly what I'm talking about. It's funny, we're hosting an event in Nashville next week at our hotel. And I got off the phone and I said to him, I'm not sure we can afford to stay in our hotel. That's a Town Place Suites in Nashville, and our rate next Thursday is $350. So I think, that all bodes really well. And I think, I would tie that back to also just overarching comment about, ESG. Companies that are really focused on this, and as we're thinking about development and we're thinking about new projects, what are we doing in the conceptual design phase and the schematic design phase to incorporate all of the ESG goals that have been articulated at a much broader level in these hotel companies or real estate companies in general? What can we do on a project basis to impact that, across the board? And it's interesting, for the very first time ever, we're responding to a proposal from a public company, a request for proposal from a public company this week that had a very extensive diversity, equity, inclusion questionnaire that we were required to complete to prove that we're actually not just full of hot air, but we're actually doing something. These are not hollow promises that we're making, but we're actually implementing things that will affect positive change. And I think that's going to be a significant change going forward too, as people are looking at service providers and making sure that their values and goals are aligned, on the ESG front and the DEI front, and we're actually incorporating that into our project. So I think there's massive opportunity there across the board. So, and again, on the hospitality sector, generally speaking, throughout the US, feeling terribly positive about what's to come. We've got a supply-demand imbalance. We've got a market that's hungry to travel and go and do. There's very little incremental supply that's hitting the market because of all the delays and project challenges of the last, 3 years. So it's a really good kind of supply-demand equation in favor currently of the owner-operator.
Oh, interesting. Good. That's great. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, hashtag same. I agree with everything there, but some of the key points that I kind of thought about when you were talking there, Andrew, is definitely it's interesting. Just let's say very anecdotally and narrowly focused on Indianapolis, and now we do work in other parts of the country, but the spaces in Indianapolis that are exciting, where people want to come back to, and I'm looking at workspaces, is if you're local, Box Factory. It's like a big kind of industrial building that had been renovated. There's interesting amenities like a boulder climbing facility on site, and it's wellness kind of infused in this more interesting space. It's not a tower. Bottle Works, that's always energetic and lively. The central core of downtown is, yes, maybe starting to come back, but I think if you're looking at where is the energy spreading earlier, it's those types of sites from a real estate perspective. But then also to double down on, we've already mentioned Minneapolis, and God, yes, the tragedy that happened there with George Floyd. But DEI is infused in every single one of our projects now. Just the concept of how are we being more inclusive with the workforce? We certainly aren't, our whole business was set up to ask questions of everyone within an organization to make them feel included. So, we've been doing this for 10 years now, but the work has become even more meaningful in that regard. And it's trying to figure out, how do we build these physical spaces that are going to make diverse populations of people actually want to come and be in here. And, I've had conversations with deans of, brand new buildings of beautiful state-of-the-art schools who say, I can't figure out why our students of color don't feel comfortable in here. That's a big problem. And we need to start figuring out how to address, some of these shortcomings that we have with spaces that we weren't thinking, in that inclusive manner. So I think there's going to be a huge push from a real estate perspective to start to look at how we strengthen and become more inclusive when we're thinking about, what do these spaces say to people? Do they make everyone feel comfortable?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And then I think also, as we think about all of these issues, really, we're very focused on that with our teams as well. And I would say we're much more focused on that today than we were pre-COVID. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that's come out of this, that, we truly are a lot more empathetic to our own teams. And I also think that's the same way we're really trying to understand the values of our clients and making sure that we're aligned. And that it's going to be a really great experience for all of us as we embark on a project together, because, those projects can take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And so we want to make sure that, we're teed up for success on a personal level, that we're actually going to enjoy the process, and not rue the day that we signed that contract.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, and I think and again, the companies that are very focused on this and are actually doing something that's real and tangible and material, we can all do better. We know that. But at least if we're doing something and we're starting somewhere and we're having those conversations, for us, attracting people from different backgrounds to work in our business is really hard. And so we're figuring out, why aren't we seeing those candidates? How do we attract team members? And then so what we're really realizing is we need to start basically at the high school level and getting people into our office on kind of little internships or office tours. I think, Sam, you mentioned that you'd done an office tour
Yeah.
at one point.
Yes, I did in
You were a
college.
student, right?
Yes. Yeah,
So
that's
our
right.
outreach to all of these communities is so important. And that's one of the things that we did through Hotel of Tomorrow. We had these design challenges where we reached out to all sorts of universities around the world, and historically Black colleges and universities in the US, particularly with a focus on that, to participate in our design challenges. And that could all be done remotely, but we're just trying to get the word out there. Architecture and design, generally speaking, has a pretty bad reputation. The reputation is, hey, it's a great place to work if your parents can afford to send you there. Right? That was, the 1980s, 90s, aughts version thereof, and communicating to the world that that's actually not the case, and there are wonderful career opportunities here, and then, a place to develop a long-term career is definitely part of the message, because we're not perceived as that right now. So a lot of communication, and I think it starts really at high school.
Mhm.
I think you could tour the old post office, which opened up like right when the pandemic hit, and I think it just is a really cool space. And they just opened a food hall, so a little plug for the Loop there, if you're in Chicago. Um, it looks like 25% of you are in the office full time, and 75% are hybrid. I still think those hybrids are a little cafeteria style, pick and choose which days you want to be in the office. Christina, did you want to ask the next question about real estate?
Yes, so we've talked about growth. Now, what about technology? Where do you see technology coming into play with real estate? Seeing any changes? Anything coming, in the next 5-10 years? Where do you see technology going? Sam, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I mean, the low hanging fruit in this response is just that people need to, have, let's say, rooms to take calls uniquely that they didn't maybe before. Technology needs to really ramp up, and we need Zoom rooms. Like that's a very easy answer. We need to create policy around how we're using technology. It's not enough just to have the Zoom room. Like if I'm we experience this at our office all the time, and we watch ourselves break our own rules, and we need to get better. But if I'm on a call and my colleague's on the exact same call, do we sit in a conference room, or do we each go find our own conference rooms, our own Zoom rooms, to try to make an equitable situation for our colleague who's at home or whomever we might be speaking with? So I think the policy around technology is going to be important. Obviously, there's the obvious things that we need, but then what's interesting is we'll get asked this question a lot of times. Leaders will want to know, we're doing research and we're engaging their workforce, and they'll want us to almost have like a crystal ball and say, well, what is technology going to be like in 5 years from now? And we're like, technology changes every 2 months. There's something new. Like we can't possibly know what will occur in 5 years from now. But what is interesting is if you just look from an ethnographic standpoint at people's behaviors don't take these extreme drastic swings, over a course of time. So what we're trying to encourage people to do is really look at the behaviors of people and understand what those behaviors are, and try to map out and think about how will technology continue to evolve and support the behaviors that those people want to have. And so we think that that's a more maybe appropriate lens to look at when we're thinking about technology. There will always be, it's changing so fast, there will always be new things, but people's behaviors won't necessarily be able to keep up with that. So thinking about, what do they truly need? How do they truly behave? That's probably the more important question.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's so interesting, right? I mean, if we look at, this kind of like meteoric exponential growth in adoption rates of technology at the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, my 85-year-old mother was all of a sudden WhatsApping me and ordering groceries online. And before that, she could barely make a call. And then, 2 weeks later, we're based on necessity, that's where we were. And I think, that's a very interesting piece now, particularly, as a hotel guest, what is my expectation with respect to technology? And it may vary depending on the type of trip I'm making, but whatever travel hat I'm wearing, if it's a corporate trip or I'm going to someone's wedding or it's a social event. But sometimes I don't want to deal with any human beings. I just want to do it all via technology. There are other times that, we're actually in the hospitality business. And so having humans and connecting with people is very much an important part of what we do. So in the hotel world, having that option available, both things that work really well. And I think, working really well is what the big issue is, and making it, as easy to use as possible and knocking out all the pain points. For Alice this morning, like struggling with the webbing, why was that a problem? I mean, like, you've done it 50 times, right? But all of a sudden today there we go, right? And so the technology companies and the delivery of the technology has to be as intuitive and simple and pain-free as possible. And I think in hotels now, as we talk about this hybrid environment, a lot more bandwidth, if you will, going into, or tech muscle going into hotels. So, for example, if you're having a big meeting now, maybe before you sent 6 people, now I'm sending 2 or 3, and the other 2 or 3 are going to join remotely at some point, but in a way that's absolutely seamless and pleasurable and enjoyable, and there's not a lot of stress or tension associated with that. So I think that's a big part of it. I mean, and at the end of the day, the whole point of it is to make our lives easier, right? So if the technology is along the way continuing to make our lives easier and is evolving and changing as rapidly as our businesses and consumers are evolving and changing, I think we're in great shape. And I think this notion of also connecting the digital experience to the physical experience and the hybrid concepts is something, particularly in hospitality, that there needs to be a lot of work done on. And then how does the design of the facility support that going forward? Because we will meet in a very, continuing now going forward in different ways than we did when, 5,000 people sat in a ballroom on a stacking chair 3 years ago. I don't think we're going to be doing a lot more of that in the immediate future for sure. And that may be one of the behaviors that will, change forever, as long as the technology is there to support that.
I think it's like all of this to me is so interesting. And while you were talking, I thought of another story that came out of just this is a project we were doing in Northwest Indiana. And it pulls into this whole ESG kind of conversation. Leadership team says, we are going paperless. We actually are paperless. We don't need to, everything will be technologically focused. All of our information will be there. And we said, that's okay, good to know. Like, said that at the beginning of the project. As we work through this project and are collecting data from their stakeholders, they continue to ask us for more storage space. They do not have enough space to store their papers. And when we collected quantitative data on how they were using their building, which there weren't many of them using the building, but their number one highest used space was their copy center. And so we were able to go back to their leadership team and say, you've got a challenge here that is flying in the face of your values and, trying to be more environmentally appropriate. So you either need to invest more in your filing system and you need to continue going down that path, or you've got to work a way to figure out how to change these behaviors that's going to support the technology that you're trying to infuse. And it's hard. It's really hard. And, how you get this workforce to make, nobody wants to make change. They've always printed out the thing and written on it or whatever, or saved it in the file. How are you now going to get them to adopt this new, digital system to do that? And that is a major challenge in getting people to move forward.
Yeah, and having the technology provide real-time information that's actually useful to people too, I think is interesting. I mean, sometimes I think, why do I need to know that? But there are other things that you're like, oh, that would be really interesting. For example, in the Rand Tower Hotel that we opened in Minneapolis, early on in the pandemic, we're monitoring our indoor air quality constantly, and then we have readouts in various parts of the hotel in the public spaces so people can understand exactly what the indoor air quality is relative to environmental benchmarks and other metrics as well, which I think is kind of interesting, because particularly at that time, and I think going forward, quality of air is going to be very important to us. And that all ties back to, the wellness issues that we were talking about before, and feeling safe and comfortable and, in an environment that's very hospitable and welcoming.
That's all super fascinating to me, especially the air quality one. Um, as somebody who has allergies, I remember pre-pandemic they were beginning to offer these air filtration rooms. I'm sure we'll see more of those, so you have your own private air filter. So here's some more personal questions about the pandemic. What is it that's keeping you up at night, if anything?
Yeah, I can feel this because I'm a light sleeper, but I think it used to be, it affected our business pretty significantly early on. So, what was keeping me up at night was boring, payroll. Are we going to, do we have cash? That kind of thing. But now I think what's interesting when I reflect on what I'm thinking about at 2 a.m, it's usually how excited I am about things that we're working on. So I'm thinking about like, oh, isn't this an interesting problem? How are they going to solve this? Because there's just so much activity around rethinking, the future of work. It was almost like a faucet turned on January 1 of 2022, and everyone all of a sudden was just reaching out to ask us the exact same question, but they're all a little bit different. So keeping me up at night is more so now these really fascinating, complex puzzles that we're working on.
Yeah, I sleep really well, so.
Lucky for you.
I mean, we've been through all sorts of ups and downs, since we started the business. So I kind of feel like what I think about a lot is the opportunity here, the excitement as we rethink the business, as we reevaluate the services we provide, the way that we deliver our services, who our clients are. I mean, that's a very interesting change, because a lot of people, particularly in hospitality, left the industry. And so, there's this gigantic reshuffling on the owner, operator, developer, lender, consultant, attorney side. So there's lots of new people for us to get to know and build relationships with and communicate. And I think, for us, the opportunity is, as we think about all that, is please, let's not recreate in the image of 2019. Let's make sure that we've emerged from this stronger, better, more relevant, our systems, our process, our approach, our messaging, and all those things are very relevant to today, and not think about what was before. So we're very forward focused, very future oriented in our thinking, and trying to understand what it is that we can do better. So I think, that's the exciting part about this for me. It gave us a real opportunity to rethink, reset, recalibrate everything. And that's what we're really busily doing. And I think that's probably our mantra forever now going forward, is just constantly reevaluating, because it's a very dynamic marketplace. And as we were saying before, consumer expectations, consumer behaviors, and all the research that Sam does, monitoring, it's changing so dramatically, and making sure that we're really in touch with that, and that we're all very research driven, and particularly, ultimately end user focused, and developing product and process and design that responds to the needs of the changing marketplace. So they're the things I think about, but again, I sleep well.
That is good. I'm glad they're a good sleeper. And another curious question I have for you, and this is more personal again too, but is there anything that you started doing during the pandemic, any hobby or anything like that, where you kind of kept it up? Maybe it's learning to cook, something like that. Sam, how about you?
I mean, yeah, 100% cliche. I definitely took on cooking in a big way. So, I mean, I'm probably more invested in that than I was prior. But just let's say my silver lining, or what I hope I continue to keep from this, is, I'm trying to think about how to say this, but like kind of valuing being with people.
Yeah.
I don't think I value that. I'll find myself at like, a concert, and I'm like, God, look at us here. Like, this is really Pollyanna and probably overly optimistic, but like, how awesome is it that we're all here together, or, at a party with friends or whatever. I hope I don't lose that excitement around that.
That's great.
Yeah,
Andrew, what about you?
I feel the same way, Sam. It's like, I would say, just generally, just simplifying everything, getting rid of the clutter, literally and figuratively, like, whether we're doing that in design of hotels or just in the way that we live our lives, and not wasting times on things that really don't matter. So I keep telling our teams, we just got to focus on what matters, and we all really need to agree on what it is that matters. And I think one of the things that really matters to all of us is having a sensible work-life balance and being able to have time to, assimilate, focus on our relationships, focus on our friends, focus on our families, savor those moments. I think I was probably a little cavalier with all of that before this, and now I am very much focused on it. And I think, understanding the power of relationships. And, for us, I think we've built a lot of great relationships, over the last 35 years, and, and build a business that was based on trust and on integrity. So when the pandemic hit, we banked a lot of, credit, if you will, in those relationships. And those relationships are the people that turned to us during the pandemic to provide services and to help them. So it was those relationships that made the business reasonably successful, even during those difficult times. And I think just really understanding the importance of relationships personally and professionally, and developing a much deeper understanding and connection, personally and also with our clients and our team members, that's a big change for me, and I'm really focused on it, and I love it. It's just a great thing to do. It makes me feel good. I think it makes the team feel good. It makes our clients feel good. And I think at the end of the day, if everybody's feeling good, feeling great, then it all works out. But I think really focusing on the people piece a lot more is just great. And that ties back, obviously, to our conversations around ESG and DI and all those other things. But yeah, I know it's probably a little cliche too, but like, this notion of empathy, but leaders need to be a lot more empathetic and a lot more understanding, and not just say the word, but actually practice it. And so that's a big change for me, and I'm really enjoying it.
Thank you both. This has just been really fascinating, and you're both really interesting people. So I'm just excited. This will be viewable again on Ice Miller's YouTube channel and somewhere on our website, which is being redone, so I can't tell you where to go just yet. But we also do a drawing for a lucky winner. Kristen, if you're ready to surprise this time, or should we tell them what it is?
Well, I drew the winner, and as of right now, it's Heather Bush with Carson Design, and I believe she is still on the call. So, congratulations.
Heather, we will reach out for a mailing address. It's a nice little succulent plant. So, I don't keep things alive very well, but I have managed to make an orchid rebloom and keep a shamrock alive for 2 years. So, hopefully, you are a plant person and can keep the succulent alive. So. Well, thank you, everyone. Christina, anything further? Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Sam. This was really great and just really appreciative.
Yeah, thank you both. This was really interesting. I now know I want to ask for a boulder wall in our office and more Zoom rooms. But very interesting and great takeaways for what's to come down the road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yep.
Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.
Great day.
Bye.
Bye.